In this video, we are going to start talking about evolution and the different mechanisms that can cause evolution. First, why is evolution important? Evolution is so important because it's a unifying idea in biology. It tells us how we have such diversity of living organisms today, as well as how physiology has come about in all of our bodies. So let's start with the definition of evolution. Evolution is the change in the genetic composition of a population over time. Now, genetic composition, what are we talking about here? We are talking about changing the DNA. So evolution, we are looking at changing the DNA of a population over time. We're not talking about the phenotype or the appearance of the organism, but rather the genetics. Now, the next key part of this definition is we are talking about a population. So it's populations evolving, not individual organisms. Now, why can't individuals evolve? It's because of the next part of the definition. We need lots of time to go by in order for evolution to occur. By lots of time, we mean multiple generations. And if we just have one individual organism, we are not going to have multiple generations. So evolution will not occur. A population is the smallest group of organisms that can evolve over time. Next, so we are talking about the DNA changing. That means that evolution can change the gene pool of a population. So we can reword that definition to say change in the gene pool of a population over time. And a gene pool is just a combination of all genes present in a reproducing population. So all the DNA present in a reproducing population. Now, Charles Darwin is said to be the father of evolution. Charles Darwin was a British naturalist who proposed that the theory of evolution happens by natural selection. So in later videos, we are going to talk through the mechanisms that cause evolution. Mechanisms mean how does something happen? And we're going to see that Charles Darwin said that evolution happens by natural selection. But we're going to find out in other videos too that natural selection is not the only cause of evolution. Evolution by natural selection leads us to an adaptation. And now what an adaptation is a process that enables organisms to improve their chance of survival and reproduction. Organisms need to both be able to survive and reproduce. If they don't survive, they're not going to be able to pass on their genes. And if they don't reproduce, they're definitely not going to be able to pass off their genes to the next generation. So adaptations are important to evolution. Now, I have 3 pictures down here. My first picture is of a fish. What adaptations do fish have to their particular environment? They live in the water. One thing fish have is that they have a torpedo-like body shape. Their body is this torpedo shape because it makes them more streamlined. That means that they can swim faster through the water with less resistance. Swimming faster through the water enables these fish to swim away from predators. If they swim fast enough, they're probably not going to get eaten. And if they don't get eaten, they survive. They can reproduce and pass on these genes to the next generation. So they have an adaptation to their particular environments. The next organism is a succulent. A succulent lives in a completely different environment than our fish. Succulents typically live in deserts. And in deserts, there's not a lot of water there. So succulents, one thing that they have that allows them to live in this desert and survive is that they have a waxy outer layer called a cuticle. That waxy outer layer keeps the water inside so that they're better able to survive through those dry, harsh climates in the desert. Additionally, if you've ever felt a succulent, it's very squishy because they have lots of tissue on the inside of their leaves that allows them to store water. So both of these are adaptations that allow succulents to survive in its particular climate of that dry desert. Finally, our caribou, they have the environment of being super cold in the Arctic, and they have adaptations that allow them to be able to survive and then reproduce. Those adaptations, they have thick fur so that they can survive through the cold. Additionally, their hooves are in a shape where they can grip onto the ice and they're not going to slip around as much. So they have adaptations that allow them to survive and reproduce in their particular environment. So adaptation, that word is connected to our next term, which is survival of the fittest. Now, when we are talking about being fit in biology, it's not the same way that we talk about fitness when we go to the gym. We're not talking about how fast you can run a mile or how big your muscles are. Instead, fitness talks about how the organisms that are better adapted to their environments have increased levels of survival and reproduction. So once again, fitness is connected to those two concepts of being able to survive and being able to reproduce to pass on your traits to the next generation. So let's do an example problem now. This example problem says, which of the following is able to evolve by natural selection? Now, when we were talking about evolution up above, we said this key statement here, that it's populations that evolve, not individual organisms. But we're talking about organisms here. So knowing that we're talking about organisms, I can automatically eliminate answer choice B and answer choice C. We're not talking about organisms if we're talking about a molecule or an atom. So that leaves us to choose between A and D, and remembering that it's populations that evolve because we need lots of time, lots of generations to go by, we can figure out that D is our answer. A cannot be our answer because one individual is not going to experience many generations. So our answer choice is D. A population is able to evolve by natural selection.